All right, everybody, thanks so much again for being here at Football Fridays at the Eck. Our second catching up with guest today is one of the great Notre Dame quarterbacks of all time. In 1973, he helped lead the Irish to an undefeated regular season, a memorable Sugar Bowl victory over Alabama, and the program's 9th national championship. Please welcome Tom Clements. Tom, like a lot of great quarterbacks at Notre Dame and elsewhere, you hail originally from Western Pennsylvania, but growing up, it wasn't just football that you excelled at. You were also a star basketball player and had the option of either coming to Notre Dame as a quarterback or going to North Carolina and Dean Smith as a point guard. How did you choose to pursue football at the collegiate level over basketball?
Well, it was tough because I had played basketball since about the 5th grade, and I really didn't start playing football till the 9th grade. So I was always better, I thought, in basketball than football. But it wasn't until my senior year, when I started to be recruited, that I really thought about playing football. And it came down to the fact I thought I had advanced in basketball maybe to the point where I couldn't advance anymore. I thought I had a lot of room to improve in football. I had more potential. And then when I visited Notre Dame, it was everything I wanted a college to be. I loved the campus. It wasn't in a city. It was enclosed by itself. And it was, all the trees. It was just what I had. I had a picture in my mind of what a college should be like, and that was it. And but I still was leaning towards basketball, but everyone in my family wanted me to go play at Notre Dame, so that tipped the scales.
You, I believe, were in the last class, or one of the last classes, when freshmen were ineligible to play football, but your sophomore year, you became the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. You had an excellent year. The team had a very good year, but it ended with a couple of disappointments. First, the USC game when Anthony Davis scored all those touchdowns and was kind of taunting the Notre Dame team in the end zone, and then the disappointing kind of blowout loss to Nebraska in the bowl game. Coming off of two very high-profile, disappointing losses, what was the team's reaction to that in the off-season heading into the 1973 year?
Well, Era always said, and I think it's true, that those losses, especially the Orange Bowl loss to Nebraska, I mean, they beat us every which way a team could beat another team. I think it was 40-6. Johnny Rodgers, who was the Heisman Trophy winner, he scored a touchdown on a run, on a pass reception. He threw a touchdown pass. I mean, he just put on a show. And Era always said that those two losses, and particularly the Nebraska game, they were the catalyst for the next season. Everyone had a bad taste in their mouth about how the season ended. We wanted to rectify that, and everyone was waiting until spring practice began to try to win a job on the new team. And spring practice was very intense. And we started to develop a team, and then that year we got a great freshman class, and they came in and were, Ross Browner was there, Willie Fry, Luther Bradley, and Steve Niehaus, and so they really gave us that impetus to get going, and we had a great year.
The year, started off great, 5-0, but you guys weren't really rising up the polls, and it seemed like, I think, that the national media was waiting to see you play USC. Obviously, they'd beaten you badly the previous year. They were defending national champs, and I think hadn't lost a game in 23 straight games without a loss. Going into that game, what was the atmosphere like here at Notre Dame, leading up to such a huge matchup with such a bitter rival?
Well, as you can imagine, the all week, I mean, it was the campus was electric. There were pictures of Anthony Davis on the sidewalk everywhere, so people could walk over him and stomp on him. And really getting ready for that game, it started the week before. We had played Army at West Point, and we beat them 62-3. And we went into the locker room, and everybody's jumping around, excited, enthusiastic. And it was not because we had beaten Army, but because we knew Southern Cal was the next game. And Era did a great job of getting us ready, and from the get-go of that game, we just played very well, and fortunately we beat them.
Speaking of the get-go of that game, I think on USC's first offensive play, Pat Haden threw a pass out to Lynn Swan, and the Luther Bradley, who you mentioned a few minutes ago, the freshman, hit him so hard that he dropped the ball and lost his helmet. Did that moment set a tone for the game from your perspective on the sideline?
Well, any time you have a play like that, it excites not only the defenders on the team, but it excites the guys on the sideline and the stadium. And so we knew it was we were going to play well. They were obviously a great team, but we knew we were going to play well, and we were confident we could beat them.
You played very well in that game, leading the Irish to a 23-14 victory. And your style of play as a quarterback, you could kind of do it all. You were a great, accurate passer, could throw the ball well downfield, but also a very effective scrambler. I think you scored 12 rushing touchdowns in your time as quarterback at Notre Dame. But Tom Pagna, in his book, The Era of Aris, said that the other thing that really, in his mind, as Era's lead offensive assistant, kind of set you apart was your mental, the mental side that you brought to the game, and how he said his offense and Era's offense, they could completely open it up with you as quarterback because you could run everything that they had in their playbook. When you look back on your career, and you went on to be a quarterback coach, what do you think was your greatest strength as a player?
Well, it put me on the spot here. I guess my overall athletic ability. I did understand the offense. It was a great offense to play in. I was never a great passer, and I played in the CFL after, and I developed into a pretty good passer. But probably my scrambling ability and maneuverability at that time were my best aspects.
You after the USC game, team kept it rolling. Finished the regular season 10-0, Ara's first undefeated regular season, and set you up to play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. They were ranked first in the country. They had the legendary Bear Bryant. He said before the game that he thought it was his best team at Alabama, his best team he had ever coached. He also said that it was going to be the biggest football game in the history of the South. Going into that game, did you appreciate the magnitude of Notre Dame and Alabama playing for the national championship?
Probably not. I mean, we knew it was a big game. We knew it was for the national championship. They were a great team. We thought we were a great team, but we didn't really get involved in the North and the South and the Catholics versus the Protestants and those types of things. We were watching the film of Alabama, and we said that these guys are pretty good, so we better be ready to play them, and we better play well. And as time has gone on, obviously those things are brought to the attention of the people who played in the game, and it's nice that it worked out the way it did. But when you're 19, 20 years old and you're playing football, you're doing what you like, you have a big game, I mean, that's what you're focusing on.
Luther Bradley has told a story about the day of that game when he was in an elevator with you going down to take the bus to the stadium, and he said he told you, he was a freshman, and he told you how nervous he was, and that you said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, but that pressure is self-inflicted and that he should just go out and have fun. And he said he remembered being amazed that the quarterback of the team, who had so much pressure on his shoulders, had that attitude going into the game. What was it about you that allowed you to stay calm under pressure in those situations?
I don't know where I heard that line, but I thought it was a good line when I used it. But I always felt, and even it started in college, that if you prepared as best you to the best of your ability, and you did that 100%, and you gave 100% during the game, everything was going to work out. And if it didn't, that just wasn't your day. And that's the way I always felt, and that held true throughout my coaching career. I think if you have as you play a game as a player, you have to try to win the play, and if you don't, figure out why you didn't win, and try to adjust for the next play, but then forget about it. Because if you're thinking about the previous play when you're playing the current play, you're probably going to have an unsuccessful play. And you take the game a play at a time, and what you have to, each guy has an individual battle, and if at the end of the game you've won more plays than your opponent, you know, you have a good chance to win. So that's the mindset I always had.
You proved near the end of that game your ability to thrive under pressure, certainly. So let's get to the most memorable moment of the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame was up 24-23 with about 2 minutes left, but backed up, to the its own 2-yard line, and it was 3rd and 8. If you didn't get a first down, obviously you were going to need to punt, and Alabama would have the ball just about already in field goal range. But it was, from a coach's standpoint, a very difficult decision, I think, of what to do, because if you drop back to pass, it had been raining that day, and you trip, you get a safety, and Alabama already has the lead and is getting the ball back. So we actually have a clip of what ended up happening on that pivotal play. Let's take a look and see how it went down.
This is the dream match, the most important game of the year.
Notre Dame and Alabama. At Notre Dame, football is a religion. At Alabama, it's a way of life.
All started in Notre Dame 84 years ago. Rockne, Leahy, Parsegan. 3rd down. Clements coming out. There's a pass, and he's got his man. Robin Weber, number 91, a sophomore from Dallas, Texas.
Give Tommy Clements all the credit in the world. We said at the very top of the show, he was a young man who was not afraid to throw. That his favorite receiver was Demily. He proved that out. That his second favorite receiver was Casper. He proved that out as you look at the scoreboard clock. And now to number 81. What a clutch play.
34 yards. First down at the 38, and there's Coach Paul Bear.
Can you play that again?
So, that pass ends up sealing the national championship for Notre Dame. We were able to run out the clock after that. But going back to that moment when Ara called the play and told you it was going to be a play-action pass, were you surprised?
I think I was on the sideline prior to that game. He said, let's go with this play. It was power eye right, tackle trap pass left was what it was called. And it did surprise me somewhat. I said, are you sure? And he said, he said, yeah. And I said, okay, let's do it. And it's one of those things, like I was mentioning earlier, that was a play that we had run and practiced that year probably 30, 40, 50 times. So when the play was called, I think everyone else on the team, they were just worried about executing their assignment. We weren't thinking about the fact that if we weren't successful, that it put us in a bad position. Eric called the play. He was the coach. We were going to run it, and we were successful. It's kind of funny. Robin Weber was a freshman, and he always says that was the first pass ever that he caught from me. So it's kind of weird.
There's a story that after the game in the locker room, your team it's pandemonium celebrating the national championship, and Bear Bryant came into the locker room, congratulated Ara, and then said, I want to talk to Mark Clements. Despite the, putting aside that he got your first name wrong, what did it mean to you that the opposing coach and such a legendary figure in college football sought you out after that performance?
Well, that's one of the great memories I have personally of that game because, I played 3 years of football in college. I played 13 professionally, and that was the only coach who ever made the effort to come over and to the locker room and congratulate a player. And I had obviously grown up a football fan in general. I liked Alabama because Joe Namath went there, and he's another Western PA QB who, as he went along, he was what I liked. He was my idol back then from Beaver Falls. So to have Bear Bryant come over and after a big game like that and be so gracious, that was a great memory.
that offseason, coming off of the national championship win, Ara and yourself obviously kind of on top of the Notre Dame world, and I know you both attended and spoke at, I believe, the Notre Dame Club of Chicago's annual Rockney dinner that offseason, and I think you have a good story of the trip back from that dinner when Ara and you were coming back to South Bend in a car, and I was hoping you'd share it with the group here.
Sure, it was a great evening in Chicago. It was a long evening, and all the congratulations to Ara and to me for the season and the game, and so Ara said it's time to go back, and he said, I'm tired. Can you drive? And it was just he and I in the car, and so we're driving, and I don't drive very fast, and I could see Ara getting anxious over there. He wants to get home, and he says, speed it up a little bit, Tom. So I sped it up maybe a mile or two per hour, and he's getting angrier and angrier, and all of a sudden he says, stop the car. He says, you get in the back, I'm driving. So I said, okay. He starts driving, and then he goes 5 miles over the speed limit, then 10, then 15, then 20. And pretty soon we hear a siren, see lights flashing, it's a cop car. And the guy comes up and asks for the license, and he looks at it, and he looks at Ara in the front seat, he looks at me in the back seat, looks at the license again, and he again looks at Ara, and he looks at me in the back seat, and he gets on the walkie-talkie to his chief back in the station. He said, Chief, I just stopped someone for speeding, and I don't know what to do because they're big. He says, well, who is it? Is it a state senator? He said, no, someone bigger. I said, is it the mayor of Chicago? He said, no, someone bigger. He says, well, who is it? He says, I have no idea, but Ara Parsegan is his chauffeur.
Well, if he didn't know who you were then, he probably did after the next year in 1974, your senior year. You had another tremendous year, finished fourth in Heisman Trophy voting, were a first-team All-American, but at the end of that season, at the end of the regular season, Ara announced that he was going to be stepping down as coach at Notre Dame. And I know for the team, it was very important to win that final bowl game. You were playing Alabama again. They were number one again, and you successfully spoiled their attempt at another national championship. What did that mean to you as a player to send Ara out with such a dramatic victory? And what was the mood, the scene like in the locker room after that game?
Well, that was one of the times where there was, as a player, I knew there was some added significance. As I mentioned earlier, you go into a game, you play a play at a time, and you try to win, and at the end of the game, whatever happens, happens. But we knew it was Ara's last game, and we wanted to win it for him, and it was another close game. We beat them by 1 point the year before. We beat them by 2 points this year. It wasn't as exciting a game, but it was a very, very hard-fought game. And I guess in the locker room after, I don't have specific memories, but it was probably I was a senior at the time. I knew I was leaving, Ara was leaving. Probably for the players who were remaining, they had a little more concern about who the next coach was going to be, and wanting to play for Ara. So I was happy to go out with a win, and the team was happy to provide a win for Ara in his last game.
Ara obviously passed away a little more than a year ago. Beyond football, what did he mean to you in your life?
Well, he's a great role model. As a person, he was a great role model with respect to how to prepare for anything. He was very meticulous. He paid attention to detail, very organized, and whatever you do, if you go on and play football, if you go on into business, being that way is going to be helpful. And he was just a great guy. I remember it was my first year. I was playing up in Canada, and it was early in the morning. We had practices at 4 o'clock at that time. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and telephone rings, and I get out of bed. I was sleeping in, and no different than college, sleeping in. And it's Aaron on the phone, and he's just calling up and wanting to see how I am, and he was that kind of guy, and he would do anything for his players. And he talked to players who have left, and a lot of them would come back and ask for favors, and he would be as helpful as he could be. But great human being and a great role model.
You had a fabulous career in the Canadian Football League. You're in the Hall of Fame for the Canadian Football League. But you also decided during your time as a professional player to come back to Notre Dame and earn your law degree here. What went into that decision?
Well, when I first started playing, I just enjoyed the off seasons. I'd play basketball, get ready for the next football season, and then after about my third year or so, I got married and had a kid, and I figured I'd better start doing something other than football. And I had always wanted to go to law school. I have an older brother and older sister who are attorneys, and I actually started at a school in Lansing, Michigan, Cooley Law School, because they allowed me at that time to take the first half of my freshman year courses, go play, and then come back and take the second half of the freshman courses. So after I got my first year in, I transferred to Notre Dame and got my degree from here. So it was just something I had wanted to do, I thought about doing, and as I said, getting married, having a kid, that gave me the added kick in the butt to go do it.
You practiced law for a few years after you stopped playing, but then you came back to Notre Dame again as a coach, as the quarterbacks coach here under Lou Holtz, and then went on to a fabulous career as an assistant coach in the NFL, as a quarterbacks coach and an offensive coordinator, and most notably spent a decade with the Green Bay Packers in those positions, where you coached both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. What did you like most about coaching each one of those guys, obviously Hall of Fame caliber players?
Well, Brett was a lot of fun. No, he was, but I think people probably have the wrong impression. Brett was the son of a coach, and he'd listen to you. He'd try to do it the way you wanted him to do it. But he had been at that point. He had been playing about 13 or 14 years, so. We'd talk about it. At that time, it was more of a collaboration. Brett, I'm seeing this. You might want to try to do this. And he'd say, okay, I'll give it a shot. And if it worked, he'd do it. And if not, he said, it's just not working for me. So, but he was, I've never seen anyone have more fun. He hated practice, but he had fun at practice. And he made it enjoyable for everyone else. And he obviously was a great player. But he was a lot of fun to be around. Aaron is kind of more reserved, although as time has gone on, he's become more of a prankster and tries to have fun the way Brett did. Very analytical, very smart. I was my first year as a coach in Green Bay. That was his second year in Green Bay, and at that time it was before the current collective bargaining agreement, so you could spend a lot of time in the off seasons with your players. And we had something that was called a quarterback school. That was a 6 to 8 week program where we'd meet or work out 4 days a week. We'd have so for the collective time during the week, we'd probably meet for about 10 or 12 hours, and we'd be practicing. Just the quarterbacks would be out on the field doing drills, and for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours, quarterbacks only. So spent a lot more time with Aaron, especially in his developmental stages, than I did with Brett, at the end of his career. So it was a lot of fun to see him grow. We always knew he was very good, and I remember the first time he got some extended playing time. Brett got hurt. We were down in Dallas early in the first quarter, and Aaron comes in, and we ended up losing the game, but Aaron goes about 25 for 30 for about 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that confirmed what everyone on the staff knew, that he could be something special. Now we didn't know he'd be as special as he is, because he's a great player.
Well, he had a good coach. We've got some time for some questions from the audience. If you've got a question for Tom, raise your hand. We have a couple folks coming around with microphones. We got one gentleman over here to the left, it looks like.
Tom, I'm a classmate of yours, and two of our classmates I just saw a minute ago. Do you recall back in the day when we had to take a phys ed course?
I do.
It was a pass.
I almost drowned.
I went down to the bottom, just hung out, and they said, get out of the pool. So I had I did not know you. I was playing other sports and like that. I have some friends that know you, and all the lunatic fringe who were on the football team. They're all my friends for the football team. But I ended up having, I first came out here, and you were talking about your lesser abilities as a basketball player as opposed to football. And I had the dubious honor of guarding you over at the Rock in basketball. And it wasn't that I was that bad. You were that good. So take that for you. The question I have for you today, though, is you were around Rodgers and Farr, and you have the sense of it about what a quarterback is. But I'm thinking about this guy last weekend, Ian Book, and they had some analysts for ESPN. They were saying he's really good. He's got the job done. And I'm thinking, this reminds me of somebody in college, and it was you. Do you have any kind of analysis about his abilities and yours? Does it seem someone like his style is someone like yours?
Well, I'm going to have to beg off on that question because unfortunately I haven't been able to watch much of the Notre Dame games. I did see a few minutes last year when he was playing. I did see a few minutes of the game this past week. So I can't give you an in-depth analysis of him.
He has the same size and style as
What I was going to say is I know that I saw his statistics. I saw him on certain plays. It looks like he can make the plays that Coach Kelly wants him to make. Very productive. So hopefully he can continue on. But that's as far as I can go. But I wish him the best.
We got time for one more for Murph here.
Hey, what was having an offensive coordinator and a position coach like Tom Pagno? What was he like as a coach and a man?
Well, he was a great guy. He was the coach who recruited me. Came to Pittsburgh and recruited me. I'm half Italian. My father was completely Italian. My mother was Irish, so he and my father got along very well, two Italians. And but Tom was a great coach, and actually I spent more time during the week with Tom. Then I'd meet with the quarterbacks would meet with Era game day for about a half an hour after the pregame meal. But all the meetings, all the instruction, that was done by Tom, and he was the coordinator and the backfield coach. He coached the quarterbacks, the fullbacks, the halfbacks. So I mean, he knew it all. He like Era was very detailed. Era had coached him, so they had the same mindset. And he was a great person too. Great storyteller. Jerry DiNardo and Jerry was my roommate. We went somewhere with Tom Pagno. I don't remember where it was, but we're in the car, and then we go to his house for a pizza, which is probably a rules violation today. But and he was just telling stories, and not just he could be funny. He could tell funny stories, but he was a very intelligent man, and he could talk about most any subject. He was a great guy.
Tom, we wish we could spend more time with you, but we're all out of time. I know you're here this weekend with some of your teammates from 1973 celebrating the 45th anniversary of the national championship, so we hope you have a great time this weekend, but I'm going to hand it off to our executive director, Dolly Duffy, real quick.
Okay.
Tom, Kevin, thanks so much. We could have done this all afternoon. Tom, we had a fortuitous meeting a couple years ago. I think at that time I practically begged you to let us interview you, and I promised it would be easy. Thank you so much for following up and letting Kevin interview you. It's been great.
No, it's great to be back. I enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll have a great win tomorrow.
All right, give it up for the great Tom Clements.